Welcome to the new normal, Visions of Healing. I'm your host, Steve Mencher. We're here at Weill Hall at the Green Center on the campus of Sonoma State University. And the center and the university have brought people here several times during the year to remember with art and music what we've gone through in our community in the past year. For example, on July 29th, the Santa Rosa Symphony performed the world premiere of a piece by Paul Dooley called Sonoma Strong, which commemorates the events of last October, what we've lost and what we've learned. Visual artists, writers, and performers and musicians, they often help us to amplify and synthesize our feelings. And by doing that, they bring the community together.
So it was October 8th. We had just got back from the Hadley Strictly Bluegrass Festival in San Francisco. And we got home around 8 or 9 o'clock that evening, went to bed. I just remember the room was feeling warmer and warmer. And we were like, maybe I should put the AC on, but it's October, why would we need that, right? Our kids were waking up and coming into our bedroom, and they just couldn't sleep. I remember looking at my cell phone at one point, and it was a text from a friend that said, "Are you okay?" And I'm thinking, why wouldn't I be okay?
The Tubbs fire was bearing down on the family's home in northeast Santa Rosa.
And we look outside, and it's red, very beautiful, beautiful glow. And I'd also smell burning, but I'm just thinking it's a wood-burning stove.
Ecky's children saw bushes on fire in the front yard.
There were rings of fire in the grass in the yard, and then it looked like somebody was lighting off fireworks from our roof. You could just see a shower of embers coming down, and that's when it hit me.
Ecky and her family drove in search of an escape route.
The homes around us are already halfway gone. You can see their frames, and they're completely engulfed in fire. I see this deer just run across, rabbits are scampering, not knowing where to go, and just smoke. And we make a right, and then we get to a section of the road where you can make a left or right. To the left was a lot of fire. To the right was less fire. We drove through the less fire route. I was just mortified because all the homes that we drove by were down, and I just thought, well, my neighbors are in there and perished. And I was that really hit, really heavy. And when we got out of the fire, oh my gosh, never have I ever been just so happy in my life. Just felt this sense of mortality, like life is so short. And it's precious.
The fire destroyed Ecky's house, her instruments, her home recording studio, and 3 unreleased albums worth of music. Ecky's husband and her musician father returned to the burned-down house to see if anything could be salvaged.
This was a drum that he had, but the drum covering part obviously burned away. And then he found part of some cymbals and spoons. So he took these. I think he took this little milk jug. And forks and knives into the recording studio at Prairie Sun. So when we were doing the song Marching On, he was using these items as percussion. So that's pretty neat. First I was like, what are you doing with this stuff? It's filthy and dirty. It's like, I have an idea. I'm like, okay, Dad. So it's on the track. Yeah. Stand up.
Ecky's song Marching On is on the benefit CD Out of the Fire, taped at Prairie Sun Recording Studios in Cotati. The songs featured on the compilation CD were written and performed by local musicians. CD proceeds will go to replace the instruments musicians and music students lost in the fires.
In the Oakland fire, 150 pianos have been taken out in the fire. We are somewhere between 600 and 800 There's no way to document that exactly. So you think about the American home. I grew up in a family and I was told I had to learn how to play the piano, and it changed my life. So American families and the piano is just like, you know, apple pie. The only thing I think we own in America that's really ours is our music.
Mucha, Sarah Baker, and Alan Sudduth produced Out of the Fire. Guitarist Volker Striffler was among the local artists who wrote and performed music on the album.
I lost my instruments a few years back from somebody stole them, so I know what that feels like, and I can only imagine if you lose everything, or actually I cannot imagine what that would feel like. So the idea that Mucha had really appealed to me, that you know, you would replace something that is really dear to people, which is instruments become sort of part of you. You really do start forming that connection with the instrument, and you become used to it. Things get much easier. You're familiar with the little idiosyncrasies. So when you lose that, it really is kind of a struggle to find a replacement, you know, and that's why guitar players like to buy so many guitars, because we're always looking for that next better one, you know. I think there's a certain group of people, artists, I would say, that are important to a healthy society. To look after those people, I think, is important too. Not just to rebuild the houses, but to start working on the soul of people too, you know, because that is something that gets lost.
Album producer Alan Sudduth and his wife Chris lost their Coffey Park home.
The guitar that I grew up playing my whole life was my dad's guitar, and it's a 1939 Martin D28. Over the years, I'd said, you know, Chris, if anything ever happens, I'm grabbing the Martin. When it came time to run, I went outside, figured out what was going on, came back in, woke her up, and I grabbed the guitar. If I could build a house for somebody, I'd do that.
This is just what we do, so.
Producer Sarah Baker wrote and sang lead vocals on the title track, Out of the Fire.
The arts can be healing. And blues has been used as therapy for a long time. We're gonna make it somehow out of the fire.
The fire is obviously, among other things, incredibly disruptive to everybody's life, whether that is, you know, just basic day-to-day stuff, but it's also your whole outlook changes. You know, you drive around and you still see burned out houses, and so if you have art, it's a little bit of normalcy maybe that people get back, and just something to distract them from the horribleness.
We are habitual as people. We are kind of programmed to go through life. But when really good art comes along, and you know what I'm talking about, it lifts you from your habit, from how you hear or read or see art. And it takes you to this whole new level of awakening.
Surviving the fires transformed the way Eki Shola approaches her life and music. Shola, an Ivy League-educated doctor, decided to give up practicing medicine and dedicate herself to music.
For me, it can't just be entertainment. There needs to be something more. And so the purpose and the intention of what I do has changed since the fire. The sense of community here has been phenomenal. Even close to the year anniversary, people are still wanting to help and reach out.
I think the hearts have been melted as well as the fire melted things. I think a lot of hearts have been melted, period.
Hi, Vilma.
Hi, Steve.
Good to see you. All right, it's great to see you. And I wanted to, before we read the poetry, I had never asked you, how long was it after the fires that you started to write the poetry? I asked because I've read, there's some poets that like to write in the moment. Other poets need to have things marinate a little bit.
Mine
Where
were
do you
all
stand?
written in the moment.
In the moment.
Yes, I have each one dated, and I know exactly when I remember where I was when I wrote them. We here at Friend's house were evacuated on the 9th. So I was writing as I went along. Yes, those poems are from the time. While I was on evacuation in Napa with 12 or 14 others from Friend's house, I was reflecting on how refugees around the world, what they must experience, many of them knowing they will never return to what they knew as home. We didn't know either. Refugees, ripped from daily habit, torn from the arms of familiar, stripped of everything but the nakedness of now, we are refugees. Disaster triggers adrenaline, adrenaline triggers response. We respond with amazing acuity, energy sufficient, generosity beyond resource, resourcefulness beyond supply, always creativity peppered with wit. We are refugees. Our common circumstance makes us tribal, intimate, gentle or ferocious as needed. Old barriers vanish, private shadows disappear in the light of need. We make do, accept gifts, celebrate the thinnest of choice, discover talent, ours and others. Inconvenience melts away under gratitude. We are refugees, discovering our real home in the broken, mending heart of community.
I'm heading to downtown Santa Rosa to speak with director of the Museum of Sonoma County, Jeff Nathanson.
On October 6th, the exhibition From the Fire, A Community Reflects and Rebuilds, is going to open in our museum, and this is on the occasion of the one-year anniversary of the October 2017 fires. That was an event that was one of the most significant disasters in California state, if not the nation's history. Included in people who lost their homes and lost their jobs are artists and creative people. They are part of the community. We're all part of the community. And when something happens, there is a process we all go through, a healing process. And I think that's going to be ongoing, maybe for many people for the rest of their lives. One of the things we need to do in terms of that process is to look at creative expression. And we're not only looking at visual artists, but we're trying to be inclusive of poets and performance artists and people who are expressing themselves. Today, we're going to visit 3 artists who are in the exhibition.
New media artist Kimberly Coim-Mertera is visiting the museum to discuss the installation of her artwork for the show. How did video and water and everything else get into the jars?
I've been working with really normal objects for a long time, and the idea of what we can preserve. So these are preserving jars. And I've been working with water and shooting footage through water and just manipulating light and water.
But they really do have that sort of preserving jar kind of feel. In a way, it's interesting because I think of specimens and maybe in a laboratory or in a museum context, but then we're looking through the water at this video footage that's related to the fires.
When I first was looking at the footage, I was really thinking of like sharing and wanting to preserve people's memories of, you know, what maybe they had lost. This was an opportunity to store that and to maybe share something that was precious to them.
It's not only preserving the memory, but it's also about the healing process.
Yeah, there is a real healing process since I'm using water, projecting the imagery through the water. I feel like it's a way to be with this footage and but to also have a buffer.
Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah.
Jeff and I head to the Santa Rosa home of sculptor and art teacher Martin Zuniga. Martin inspired students to create a colorful mural, which will be part of the museum exhibition. Before talking about the mural, Martin shows us one of his sculptures that was inspired by the fire.
Are these real fire extinguishers?
You know, this is what panic looks like in my head. I walked outside to get the dogs and my pets to throw them in the car, and they were leaves on fire landing in my yard, like oak leaves.
So you go looking for a fire
for
extinguisher?
a fire extinguisher. In the kitchen, I knew I had 2 fire extinguishers. I couldn't find them. They were there. I couldn't see them. My panic had set in so much. So this all shapes different where it's like it wasn't there, it wasn't there, it wasn't there. But the picture kept on popping into my head of just a red extinguisher.
Fire was all around you, so you don't even know which way to aim the thing, right?
Exactly, exactly. So you don't know which way, because there were 60 active fires by around 5 and 6 in the morning. So which way do you go?
Before the fires, Martin and his family were about to buy a home. The fire's destruction exacerbated Sonoma County's tight housing market.
There's nothing to rent, there was nothing to move into, so we got displaced really fast. It was a domino effect. You know, yes, the fire did push that first domino, but there were a lot of other pieces in the city and the county that fell because of that fire. The real estate people would come to us and say they went up 10%. A week later, it went up 8%. By the time that we got into this one, we were already had gone up 38% in months. That fire, in a way, it shook the tree, you know, to see who's going to be able to hold on to Sonoma County.
Martin saw this mural project as a way of helping students deal with the trauma of the fire.
There's flames here coming out of the amor, love, flames coming out.
How about El Aguante?
El aguante is, you know, you gotta have endurance. After all this, it's aguante, right in the middle. We will survive. It's just, you'll be there.
We will endure.
Yeah, endure.
Yeah.
Our last stop is the Glen Ellen home of artist Adam Shaw. In his studio, Adam recalls the moment when he first saw the fires approaching his house.
Stood up and looked out my window, and that whole hill across the way was completely on fire. A rolling fire. It was like moving this direction. I called up 911, and I was lucky. I got through, and the dispatcher, who sounded very harried, I said to her, "There's a fire in my house. I live in Sonoma Valley. I'm not sure what I should do." She said, "Sir, there are fires everywhere right now. If you feel unsafe, you should leave immediately." So I called down to my son, and I said, "Grab the animals." We have a dog and a cat. I said, "Grab the animals, we're out of here." And one of my son's friends who lived in Kenwood, he came in to see his house. His house was burned down. And he came to my house and he said, "I'm at your house now. It's completely surrounded by fire, and there's no one here fighting the fire." So in my mind, it was like, okay, that's it. 300 paintings, all my sculpture, my guitars, everything. It's like, all right, just let it go.
Through the efforts of local volunteers and firefighters, Adam's home was saved.
Looked like there was someone put a bubble over my house that went 30 feet in every direction. All the land around was completely charred, and everything inside was saved. These 2 pieces are the genesis of the entire show. These were found down the street from in front of the house that burned down. So this is totally untouched.
Adam has dedicated this past year to producing fire-inspired work.
Although all these pieces that have a lot of burning in them, they're not burned from the fire. They're burned by me, sort of evocative of what the fire did. This is not like I went into the fire and pulled stuff out of there. It's like, no, I pulled myself out of the fire and made this work.
One piece that was burned in the fire is a 1959 Ford truck. The artist has adorned the truck with gauze and flowers.
I want to lift people up to a higher place in themselves. You know, I mean, I feel that the best art, it like helps you wake up to be more alive, to be more conscious, to be more open, and that's what I'm aiming for.
During the first few days as the fire was sparked, our Spanish-speaking neighbors were unable to get important information for their safety. And the underlying inequity in our community has meant that those who have less are often the slowest to recover. Reporter Adia White has that story.
On the night of October 8th, many lost their homes, livelihoods, and lives. But as we recover from this disaster, the Latino community continues to be sidelined in these efforts.
When did it become clear that the needs of the undocumented community were not being met? And I was saying on day one that was clear because I was in touch with our members and friends who were undocumented, and one of the families went immediately. They were evacuated and they went right to the Veterans Building and were assisting because they were just helping. It was two parents, a teenager and a 5-year-old in that family. And they were all helping set up the beds, get the place organized, get people in there, worry about the food. And the woman who was running it was really disrespectful and rude to them. And that escalated to the point that she screamed at their 5-year-old. And they immediately left. They did not feel safe or appreciated, and there was no dignity afforded them. I think the inherent effects of structural racism in our community have not been overcome sufficiently to recognize, appreciate, support, validate, and dignify a huge membership that we depend on, who are an important part of our community. And it's really obvious in the structure of the county that that our whole community is not being included.
The North Bay Organizing Project, with the support of numerous other activist groups, submitted recommendations to Sonoma County to make sure that we are better prepared to serve the Latino community during the next disaster. One of the largest failures when the fires first broke out was the lack of any communication in Spanish.
Yo en mi caso me tocaron la puerta a mis vecinas a la 1 de la mañana y me dicen, se está quemando Santa Rosa. Yo, ¿cómo que se está quemando Santa Rosa? Y pues a salir con mis hijos y mi esposo y vámonos rápido. Ahora, en ese momento fue algo de miedo y de terror, fue de película. Pues muy triste y muy fea porque no sabes, no hay información en tu idioma, no sabes qué hacer en ese momento. Nosotros nos salimos y se me olvidó la máquina de mi hijo que tiene asma. Entonces decíamos, nos regresamos, ¿qué hacemos? ¿Nos vamos? O luego, ¿no estás preparado?
No one gave them the right information. They heard a lot of rumors that the fire was coming from Petaluma and from every other direction. They had no idea where to run. Their first few shelters they went to were full. They drove from shelter to shelter until they found one that was open.
Y luego ya cuando llegamos al shelter empezaron a dar información de dónde estaban los incendios y decías tú, ¿me regreso a mi casa o me quedo aquí? ¿Qué hago? Mi hijo, el más pequeño, tiene 7 años y él ahora, al entrar de la puerta, tiene una bolsa con ropa por si se quema. Entonces él quedó un poco traumado, mi niño.
It turns out her home wasn't in an evacuation area. Had she been given the right information, she wouldn't have had to leave. It's a nightmare many Spanish speakers endured that night. Bilingual radio station KBBF stepped in to fill these gaps in services. They put out information in Spanish when no one else was doing so. They also opened their studio as a donation center for those in need.
That day I realized how extremely exhausted we were, but yet we didn't feel tired, because there was so much love, so much people helping out. And that always gives me hope that, that when things are going so bad right now in our political atmosphere that we have right now, that at the end, I really, truly still believe that people have more good in them, and that when there's a crisis, when there's something, they really do help their neighbor. They love their neighbor. And that's something that to me is the biggest lesson I learned coming from seeing this tragic that happened in our community, I realized we were here for a purpose. We were the only ones that were giving out information in Spanish, and we were the ones that were there to serve what the vision of this radio is, and that is to empower the community by giving them information, education, for them to come out and do that. And at the same time, we celebrate our culture and we provide news and all that, but more important, we empower the people to take care of themselves. And that's what we did for those 2 weeks in October.
Sonoma County took many of the recommendations submitted by the North Bay Organizing Project. They held 2 recovery meetings in Spanish and pledged to send out all future emergency alert notifications in both languages. But after seeing the severity of the county's failure last year, these changes may not be enough to solve the underlying problems.
Regardless of what the county does next time, it will not be to any avail. There won't be any point in doing it if the trust isn't there.
Even as the county works on making its policies more inclusive, trust will take much more time and effort to rebuild.
On August 4th, country music superstar Brad Paisley came, and he sang songs of love and hope and healing for the community. About $200,000 was raised on those 2 nights. So as we listen to Brad Paisley, let's remember the lives of those lost in last October's fires.
And this is for those we've lost. When I get where I'm going, on the far side of the sky, the first thing that I'm gonna do is spread my wings and fly. I'm gonna land beside a lion and run my fingers through his mane. Or I might find out what it's like to ride a drop of rain. Yeah, when I get where I'm going, there'll be only happy tears. I will shed the sins and struggles I have carried all these years, and I'll leave my heart wide open, and I will love and have no fear. Yeah, when I get where I'm going, don't cry for me down here.